Hi, we're here in Rollinsford, New Hampshire with furniture maker Evan Court, and thanks for having us up.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You've been cranking out some really high-end pieces, and you're 26.
I am, yeah.
Just let that soak in for a minute. When you see Evan's furniture, it's gonna sting. But so you went to North Bennett Street.
I
right?
did, yep, yeah.
And you've been out of school for 4 years.
Yeah, I graduated in 2014.
And now you are showing with the New Hampshire Furniture Masters.
I am, yep, yeah, I'm invited artist with the Furniture Masters.
Which that's a big deal in the furniture world. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You just finished a couple of chairs, and I saw them on Instagram and swooned immediately. And when I was in the area, I reached out to you, and you said, "Yeah, I've got those chairs. I've got all the drawings and all this." So
Right.
we thought it'd be really fun to do a behind the design video and let the viewers into the mind of Evan Court a little bit as he goes through the processes. So we've got your drawings here, and this looks more like fine art than a chair sketch.
Yeah, I mean, I studied, after North Bennett, I studied foundational fine art for a bit and kind of got hooked on drawing and rendering, so that's now plays a pretty big part in my process. Not necessarily necessary, you don't need drawings that look like this to generate this kind of work, but it's how I see things.
So this is your first iteration.
It is, yeah. So I sort of landed after probably just a month or so of realizing that I wanted to make another piece. I was sort of finishing one up at that time. I just went through tons of ideas, lots of car rides, just sort of thinking about what form I wanted to make and what type. And I decided I wanted to make a pair of chairs. And having gone to North Bennett, my roots are based in traditional period pieces.
Which I with your furniture, I don't think period furniture at all.
But it's always a starting point for me. So I looked at a lot of Seymour pieces, some McIntyre chairs, and this is sort of a little combination of both of those, and this is where I started. So after that long thinking and sort of stewing process, this is the first drawing that I did.
And I love, you've got these Post-it notes. Looks too much like hotel furniture.
It does.
Now, I don't know if we're staying in the same hotels because this is awfully nice. But so too much like hotel furniture and then no movement. What does that mean?
So these notes, I guess, they're little critiques that I have with myself. I don't really...
This is from you?
Yeah, these are, I write little sticky notes and put them on the drawing so I can, when I revisit them, I can remember sort of what I did and what I didn't like, usually what I didn't like. So this is just my first initial like harsh critique about this particular design, and it's just too flat to me. It doesn't have enough movement through the form, so the lines are too straight. I want the viewer's eye to be able to start somewhere and just continually move around the entire piece.
Okay, so that's what you mean by movement.
Right.
Just something to bring the viewer
exactly
through an experience.
Exactly.
Almost. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So we've got this beautiful drawing.
Right.
And then
so then from there, I'm sort of realizing these issues that I personally have with the design. So then I'm just firing off a lot of quick.
It's totally different.
Yeah, really basic, fast sketches and trying to remedy those issues that I had with the last design in a fast way so that I can take those somewhere. So trying to get more...
I mean, you're spending just minutes on
yeah,
some of
seconds
these.
almost.
Yeah.
They're just in figure drawing or fine art, these would be called gesture drawings, just trying to get the quickest way possible to see what the movement is.
Okay. Okay, and you're starting to sketch joinery here.
A little bit, yeah. What I don't want to do is I don't want to design myself into a corner because in the end I do want to make a well-constructed and really fine piece of furniture. So I am trying to think about, well, if I want this curve to do this, can I physically make that with the means that I have?
That's the North Bennett creative.
Yeah, exactly. The sort of foundational woodworking tied
I mean, they really teach strong foundational
for sure.
Your joinery is exact.
For sure.
So
really
it's
cool. Mixing design foundations with woodworking foundations, trying to get a balance.
So this one has an arrow pointing to it, and this one has an arrow pointing
to it.
So
that's similar to the sticky notes where I'm just trying to remind myself and hone in on which ones I felt worked the best on this page so that if I need to go back later, I can remember and focus in quicker on which ones worked for me. And I felt at this point that these lines sort of flowing from the leg into the arm worked fairly well, so that's what I decided to run with.
This line flowing in from the
from the floor to the arm, or you can enter and pick it up from anywhere, and I liked that, so I decided to highlight those to keep working with those.
We're starting to see a little bit of some finer detail.
Yeah, just trying to get a little bit of an idea, not necessarily nail anything down yet, but figure out how some of those parts will relate with one another, which goes back to the woodworking side of it, is I need to know how it's all going to work in that sense.
Okay, so we go from your quick sketches to...
Yeah, some more, still fairly quick, honestly, probably minutes to get to these, but starting to think more about perspective and how those parts relate to each other in space a little bit more specifically, and just getting a little bit more refined, thinking about different faces and how those values work.
Is this a bird's eye view?
Yeah, so I'm not just thinking about these in perspective, but I'm also trying to think about them in essentially construction views, like looking straight down on the chair or straight on it, because those parts do look different in every view, so I'm trying to figure out how they relate to one another in different places.
All right, so elevate tweaks in the back, it should be larger, curve the seat. So you're still really almost arguing with yourself.
Yeah, essentially, and I try and be as harsh with myself as possible because now I have nothing invested in these at this point, just a couple of sheets of paper and just hours in my own head. So I want to be as critical with myself as I can be at this point, because it's easier now than it is later.
Is there anything like exercises that someone can do to step outside of their head, if you will, because I mean, critiquing your own work is impossible for some people?
I think one of the things that I try and do, and I don't necessarily think this works for everyone, but is I try and sketch things I'm uncomfortable with. And those forms might be things I never use in my own designs, but I think just drawing forms that I might not necessarily think I'll ever make can be helpful, because I might discover shapes or lines that I wouldn't have otherwise. So just sketching things that you're not comfortable with.
Interesting. Okay. For me, that'd be exercise. So moving on, we've got arrow pointing at this one. This one's the winner right here.
Yeah, that's the winner for this page.
Okay.
So then moving from there, I did just a quick thing.
Something totally different.
Yeah, I had in mind that I wanted to make this a pair of chairs. So I thought, why not just play with the idea of having them be a settee, just to see how that would relate. I decided at this point that I wasn't going to go with that. It didn't totally work for me. In the future, it might be something I'll revisit, and that's the nice thing about having these drawings is in the future, if I do decide to do that, I can just go in the portfolio and pull this one out and start from here. I'm already kind of at a starting place with it, and I can work from there. But for this particular situation, I decided not to. But it's worth trying anything at this point.
Here's one thing I just noticed. You've got blue tape on all of these as if they're hanging up on a wall.
Yeah.
Are you walking around?
Yeah, well, no, when I'm sketching these, I'll usually get a large piece of cardboard or plywood, and as I'm doing them, I'll just sort of pin them up in front of me, almost like a storyboard as I'm going along. And sometimes I'll even go as far as taking color samples if I'm going to be painting components, or taking veneer samples and pinning those up with it, just to get just to immerse myself basically in the whole design process.
Interesting. That's
what the tape is from.
That's very cool. All right.
So then I'm getting back to that other form and sort of even getting more specific with it. I'm drawing it bigger now, so it's taking a little bit more time. I'm getting more involved.
There's just one on the page.
There's one on the page. I'm even going as far as trying to draw in some environment, so I'm putting it on a pedestal like it would be if it was shown in an exhibit or something, just to try and get more of a feel for it.
We're starting to see a little bit more of a curve to the arm.
Right, and because I'm drawing it bigger and I'm more involved in this particular design now, I'm trying to also work with some details and get in there a little bit closer.
One leg in the back.
One leg in the back, and I kind of went back and forth about that, and then I did end up getting to this point, and I opted to do 4 legs. So these drawings kind of came more or less at the same time. This one I went over with pen because I felt really good about these these particular lines, so I figured I would just go in and...
You're committed.
Yeah, I'm trying to get in that mindset of commitment to these particular shapes. So I'm just making those lines as bold as possible to confirm essentially in my own mind.
Yeah, and when you start doing all the shading and everything, is that part of the exercise for you, or does your art background just
I mean
take over?
I would never say that that's the way you design, because that's just how I do it. It's not necessarily necessary. It doesn't inform anything really. It speaks to me, so I do it. I think it helps me sort of keep reflecting on those shapes as I'm working with them. And
we've still got some joinery arguments going on here.
Right. Yeah, trying, now that I sort of know really well what those lines will be or what I want them to be, I can better go in and figure out what some of the dimensions might be, working with how tenons might work, where the rear legs fall on this continuous arm, maybe some dimensions of other components other than joinery. So starting just continually getting more specific as I refine what I want.
Okay, all joints, mortise and tenon, arm tips up, and yeah, just still making notes.
Of course.
Keeping track of your thoughts.
And so from this point, I do a really serious rendering. I'm trying to get environment going, having a room in the background, once again, putting it on a pedestal and really pushing the values, essentially just making a fine art piece of what my concept is.
Yeah, you're actually playing with lighting.
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
And I like the idea of, once the pieces are completed, having something like this to accompany them, I think is a nice thing for me.
Will this go to the new owner?
It will, yep.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's pretty cool. You keep a copy, right?
I do.
All right, good. Of course. All right, so from here, where does it go?
From here, I actually made a full-size prototype and then some patterns, and we can look at those.
All right, let's check them out. So here's this drawings to this. This is your mock-up.
Yeah, I think of this just as an extension of the drawings. I like to just call them essentially 3D sketches. I'm using inexpensive materials. This is just plywood and scrap poplar. I chose to use those because it's a chair. I wanted to be able to sit in it, but if it's casework or a table or something, you can even use cardboard.
So you're sitting in this? I
am, and that was one of the sort of biggest reasons for doing this. Is I wanted to be able to test it for comfort. Because I want it to look a certain way, but I don't want it to be so uncomfortable that people want to get up after 10 seconds. So to get to this point, I didn't have any measurements, obviously, or firm measurements with those sketches. So I was able to just use some measurements from armchairs that I had made in the past, or look in books and see some measurements from those and sort of start to generate something that I thought would work. And made a dozen changes on this chair. I mean, this arm that's fastened on here now is probably the 4th or 5th one I made after making changes. I sat in this chair every day for about a week and a half and ate lunch in it to test it myself, and then invited...
You commit yourself to the process.
Yeah, of course.
That's...
And then I invited as many different people as I could to sit in it, different people of different heights and different weights, to try and get their opinion and see what worked for them, and try to make changes according to that.
That's one thing that doing these videos, I feel like people who are designing at a really, really high level all take the mock-up process very, very seriously. And because this is something you could change out this crest rail, no problem. You can change this, you can change that. Whereas once you've got, 200 hours into a piece,
yeah, it's kind of over.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is too, I mean, I wasn't at all invested when I was doing sketches, and I am a little bit more now time-wise, but still, if I get to a point where I've sat in the chair for a week and a half and I'm just not feeling it, I can still ditch it, and I don't have that much investment in it. So it's definitely a helpful thing. I would recommend this part of the design process to anyone.
So from here, do you take this to the router table to use as a template? Or?
From here, I start generating some patterns.
Okay,
so now that I sort of know what my sizes are, I can get plywood and start to figure out what those shapes might be. These two are the front shapes for the arm, for the back leg and the front leg. Those are the front profiles.
So this one would be the front?
Exactly, yep.
And that's where it is on the real piece?
Exactly.
You've got some joinery sketches?
I do, and that's going to help me in the drafting process later when I start to do a technical drawing. And then this would be the side profile of that same leg.
Oh, okay. So it goes like this.
Exactly.
And then like that.
Exactly. Yep.
And you're actually, this is reality then.
That is reality. Yeah, for sure.
Interesting. So, yeah.
And then I'm able to generate shape for the arm. This one says arm this one on it because some of these patterns I'm still not totally committed, and I'm able to keep changing them. So I think this was one of many that I made, and this was the one that I decided on using. So I sort of stuck with it. And then to your point, I'm able to take those patterns. So this is the pattern for the seat.
Okay.
And then I'm able to make
add 1 inch.
Exactly. So I'm still making notes and doing things to try and change stuff.
Okay.
And then from those patterns, I'm able to make fixtures. This is the one for the rear seat rail, which is continuous, and this was for me to flush cut it on the shaper. So I'm using the patterns to make fixtures.
All right. So what we have here, get it so the camera can see it. We have a bunch of letters and numbers. What are those corresponding to?
So the rear seat rail was made up with a process we call bricklaying. Okay. So it's small segments of wood with angles cut on the end of them so that they can create that curve when they're all put together. And they're alternated on their layers as bricks would be on a building. And that it provides an incredible amount of strength based on how the grain orientation is, and it makes it really repeatable.
Yeah, because there's no spring back.
Exactly,
or
exactly.
Like that. What are these boxes?
Those are actually just handholds, so that when I was flush cut it on the shaper, my hands were sort of back out of where the action was.
So that's purely functional.
Exactly.
Yeah,
yep. For sure.
Interesting. Okay. So from here, where does it go?
From there, I'm starting to get really serious now. So I'm actually going to make some test parts. I've decided on a primary wood, so I'm going to go with cherry for this. So I'm going to make some sample legs using those patterns. I'm going to make.
So this guy goes like so.
Exactly.
That's what it's going to be.
Exactly. So now I'm able to sort of put that leg up and step away and reflect on how I think that material choice looks. How does the cherry look? At that point, I could decide to go with a different wood, and I'm still only invested in this one small stick.
Yeah.
And then I'm also going to make a back leg.
Okay.
Too. And from that point, I use the patterns I've made to generate a full-scale technical drawing, so I know where the joinery is and the dimensions of those.
So you're going back to another drawing. Yeah, after all of
and
this.
that drawing is far less artistic than the sketches were. That's just it's
there's
pure.
No lighting.
No, there's no lighting. It's purely a front view, a side view, and then a plan view, which is looking straight down on the chair.
And is it traced from the patterns?
Yeah, exactly. I'm essentially just linking all the tracing the patterns and linking them up with other lines on the paper.
So you're using the patterns, your new reality,
right,
to go back to paper,
right,
and make sure that they work together.
Exactly.
At that point?
Yep. Okay. And it gives me a reference to, like, when I'm out at the table saw setting up to cut tenons or whatever, I can refer back to the drawing and check the measurements of everything. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yep.
So from the drawing,
I start cutting up wood and milling and making parts, and then you end up with a finished chair eventually.
All right. Well, let's reset and take a look at the chair.
Yeah, for sure.
So here it is.
Yep.
One of two you made, right?
Yeah, it's a pair. Yep.
And both are sold.
Both are sold. Yep.
Same place.
Yep. Yeah,
okay.
I didn't want to split them up. So.
Okay. Cool. It's incredible. And
I appreciate that.
We talked a little bit earlier, and one thing that when I first came in and saw it, I couldn't tell what this material was.
Okay.
And I'll just ask, what is it?
It's sprayed acrylic enamel, so it's painted. It's paint over hard maple. It's one thing that I've sort of started doing. It's a big part of my design vocabulary at this point is painting certain elements. And someone had asked me a while ago, what does the paint mean to you? And I think the simple answer for that is I like the juxtaposition of wood against the painted surfaces, because no matter how much finish we put on the wood, it's always going to have a visual texture. It's that way. So I like having this sort of cold, really flat painted surface against that warm textured wood.
Cold is the really good word for it, because it is. It almost looks like a composite or I don't know. But then we've got this incredible upholstery.
Yeah, it's horsehair fabric, actually.
That blows my mind.
And that's another tough thing in the design process, and it took a lot of time to sort of figure out what fabric to use, because you want the fabric to relate to the paint, And even though they're both black, they're both different materials. Paint and fabric are never going to look exactly the same because they're made out of different materials.
Yeah.
So that's a tough thing, and it takes some time to get that right.
The grain selection is probably the last thing that somebody would notice on this chair, but probably the most important. And it's, you know, you've got perfectly rift-sawn legs in the front, right? And then your quarter-sawn edge is showing through on the back and adding just a hair of like sparkle.
And it's still just to push that texture relationship between the painted component, which has really nothing other than its color or tone going on, and then the wood, which obviously has tons of visual texture. Yeah,
there's a lot to be learned there, though, or a lot to take away from that is, you know, finding the right place in the board for each part. That's an art form in and of itself.
And the other thing too is just as simple as making sure that all the parts for both chairs or all the parts for whatever piece we're making comes from the same board or the same family of boards, so that there's not two legs in the front that are a really good color match and then one leg directly in the back that's still the same species but from such a far different board that the color looks totally different. That's an important detail to make sure of when you're at this point.
So do you see yourself making the settee at some point?
I think I would. I think I would visit that, and I would revisit even just the side chair design too, because that's another part of the design process, is that you're never actually done. Even when you are done and you walk away from it, there's still always stuff that lingers in your head that you know you'd like to do next time, and that's part of the fun of it for me anyway.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on a beautiful set of
Thank
chairs.
You very
Congratulations on selling them.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime.
All right, let's do this again.
Yep, let's do it.
And my head's cut off.